Clay, just by chance, you've covered every single Western in Star Trek history.
Oh boy, so far.
So far. Yeah, Discovery's 4th season is entirely a Western. How many Westerns have there been, and can you name them?
I would bet second question, no. Would do double? Are you counting by episode, like the 2-parters count as a single one?
No, they're all single episodes.
They are? Okay.
Yes, unless you can think of something that... these are like overtly Western episodes.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe the one I'm thinking of doesn't count then. 6.
2. This is the 3rd. There have been 2 before this. Spectre of a Gun, which is TOS. They have the weird purple Western planet in the 3rd season. Spectre of the Gun, we watched that one. And then Fistful of Datas was the one that you watched with Dan and us. Watched that one where Data becomes everybody in the holodeck, and Worf and Deanna are in there having to deal with him.
Okay, because I was thinking the one where they go back in time, where
Time's Arrow, which is not really a Western, but they do go back to.
So I guess it's the same era, but
same
it's not
era.
explicitly a Western.
That's true. Yeah, it would be Twain's era.
Draw that distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, there's only been. This is the 3rd. There's only been 3, which is surprising to me.
I would have said 1 per series at least.
Yeah, I know. It seems like it would be the thing that you would fall back on. But no, we like Spectre of the Gun. I think we gave that a 4 out of 5, and we didn't think Fistful of Datas was nearly as good, but we put a lot of the blame on Patrick Stewart for that one because he directed it, and it was not very good. But now we're up to North Star, which is Enterprise's spin on the wheel. So let's take a break. We'll play a clip from North Star, and then we'll come back and we'll break it down.
And you were born there?
I was born in upstate New York. Spent most of my adult life in San Francisco, though. You've heard of San Francisco?
Pacific Coast. Why didn't you tell us who you were?
I wasn't sure how you'd react. We thought we'd better get the lay of the land first.
No, I can't say I blame you.
North Star is the 9th episode of the 3rd season. Came out on November 12th, 2003. It is 10 out of 28 in the Zindy Crisis arc, written by David A. Goodman, directed by David Straighten, in Universe Date Not Known, it's 2153. In this episode, Archer and the crew try to discover why a 19th century era human settlement has been placed in the middle of the Delphic Expanse.
Really stretching what being a part of the Zindy arc means in this one, I think.
Yeah, they mentioned Zindy. Zindy are mentioned once in this episode. Maybe it's a little bit of a problem that they don't focus more of the main problem of the episode on the Zindy, which you think would be Prime, but we can get into that. This is the 3rd Western. Ignoring anything else, I think this is the best looking of the 3 Westerns that they've done so far. I don't know. I wouldn't ruin anything by spoil. I like this episode quite a bit. I think that this one's fun, has a great guest cast group on there, feels like a Western, looks like a Western, and actually manages to solve a few Enterprise problems by adopting a genre like this. And although a lot of people preemptively on Twitter have said they hate this episode, and I think the patron comments are a mixed bag as well. But what did you think about it?
I didn't hate it. I thought I agree. I think it looks pretty good, even though they're using that like late 90s digital blowout effect.
Yeah, it's all done in post to make it look oversaturated or not overexposed.
Yeah, I think the costumes in the town, and I think it looks fantastic. Like it looks like a Western. Trip looks exactly like Marty McFly from Back to the Future 3.
Great guest actors in this one. I think this is loaded with the guy who plays the crooked deputy is the very first character that you see in Deadwood. He gets hung by Seth Bullock at the very in the pilot. Well, it's the same guy.
That's ironic because he hangs a person at the beginning of the episode.
And
it's actually very similar opening to.
It is. It's a very similar opening. Yeah. I actually don't know whether Deadwood or this came out first.
He's also shows up in a lot of Tarantino movies. He's the son of Michael Parks.
Yeah, James Parks is that actor's name. He's in a lot. He's got a very recognizable face. I Glenn, I think it's Morshower, is the sheriff who's been in a lot of Star Trek and is in a lot of TV in general as a guest actor. Just solid.
Usually as a general.
Yeah.
More often than not, he's playing somebody in the Pentagon.
Yes, he plays a lot of government officials. Yeah, I think it looks really good for what it is. I think that it's a sharp looking episode. I think the production value is all there. I think that there's only one thing that we'll get into that I think was kind of a mistake. It does have that overexposed look to it, which is maybe a little bit strong, but it's a very stylized thing. They actually, interestingly, they don't stick with that look for the entire time. They abandon it a little bit of the ways into the episode, and they stop doing it, which I don't know if I like. I think I would have just kept it to be consistent.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, if you have anything to say about that, otherwise I'm just going to ask you, or I will just going to say that this is an episode that requires a great deal of buy-in, I think. Like you just have to buy into what they're doing. And it's funny because I think if this is a TOS episode, you don't have any problem buying into this idea, you know? For some reason, the more with the modern Star Treks, people are like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is these Western people not evolved in 300 years? Why are they exactly the same as they were? I don't know if you think there's a difference between the series, if Enterprise needs to justify itself, or if you don't matter, or if it bugged you at all while you were watching it.
It did occur to me. But it didn't really bother me that much. I don't really care. If you want to get hung up about why the Western town didn't advance past Western technology in 300, you're more than welcome to do that. But it doesn't really bother me that much.
It does open. I mean, to be fair to that, a lot of it, like, I think in a worse episode, it would be something that I'd get hung up on and be like, okay, so they overthrew these powerful aliens, but they didn't keep any of their technology. They didn't, they didn't do...
Well, I guess they don't really establish what level of technology. I guess they have spaceships.
Yeah, they have spaceships,
which I guess would imply that there is a fairly.
They probably have better weapons than bullets, I would think.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, well, if you assume they overthrew them relatively quickly, I mean, it might have just been like, we don't know how any of this works, but we do know how bullets work, so let's just start making bullets. Nice to see that they found some native horses to that planet as well.
Yeah. They brought everything over. And I mean, they built a town on an alien planet that looks exactly like a Western town. Right. You know, it's it's not that it's not strange, but it's to enjoy the episode, I think you have to completely ignore all of that strangeness and watch it as a Star Trek episode, and Star Trek TOS episode is what I'm saying when I say Star Trek episode.
Yeah, it's it actually kind of reminded me quite a bit of the Prisoner episode where they do the Western episode.
Yep. What's that one called? Don't Forsake Me, My Darling. Is that one?
No. Fuck.
I can't remember.
I can't remember. Once Upon a Time, maybe. I can't remember exactly.
You go ahead. I'll see if I can look it up.
In that. The thing that they do here that actually kind of works, that doesn't usually work for this show, is
Living in Harmony. I'm sorry. Living in Harmony.
There we go. Yes. Obviously, Harmony is the name of the town, right? The thing that they do here that works better than usual is they start the story in media res, as it were, where they're already down on the planet. And honestly, if it wasn't for every single 2-sentence blurb about this, starting with the Enterprise crew ends up on a planet where humans from old Western times have been transplanted.
You mean the Netflix blurb before you start playing it and stuff? Yeah.
I feel like it's actually a fairly effective mystery, because the mystery is you kind of don't really know what's going on.
Right. You don't know if it's reality or a holodeck program or something that they've run into.
Yeah, and it's not really even, well, I guess it is kind of what they're after, but it's they play it pretty well, and there's a when they reveal what's going on, you get this little bit of like social commentary, which I don't know if it entirely works, but I think it's a fun episode, and The thing that I felt myself saying more than anything else was, why are they here?
Sure.
What are they doing here? What does this have to do with the Zindy stuff? But that being said, I think it falls into that tough area for a show like Enterprise, where they're still trying to do episodic stuff, even in the middle of this big serialized thing.
Yep.
But I think it worked as a standalone episode. I think it's actually probably one of the better ones.
I don't. I guess I would push back because I heard criticism too that it's a strange episode to have in the middle of the Zindy arc, and I don't. I think that if you're going to say that there's a problem there, I think it's more that they don't really thematically tie the prejudice angle into the Zindy thing. Like, Archer doesn't have a connect the dots moment where he goes like, oh, like this is exactly like the Zindy situation I'm in. I think in an episode of however many episodes are in this season, like 22, they can't do chasing the Zindy for 22 episodes. Like they have to, as you're saying, they have to take these standalone things. And I think this one works. Like as they're trying to find the Zindy, they find this weird planet that they have to examine because it's very strange. There's a Western civilization on this. It still shows to me that the show and Enterprise are still kind of a Federation starship. Even if it has this overarching mission that it has to go on to find the Zindy weapon, it still has time to do things like this. And I'm actually, is this the first episode that's not explicitly Zindy related in that, like the main background? It might be. Yeah,
I think for most of them, there's at least like a tangential
subplot or something.
Seems very much like a side quest.
I found it to be a relief, honestly. Which is maybe not to speak very highly of the Zindy arc at this point, but I was like, I'm glad that this is kind of happening, and it took its foot off the gas for a little bit, and just to have a little bit of fun with it. It has a thematic weakness which we can get into, but before we get into the weaknesses, I did want to say that one of the things that I enjoyed so much about it is that they found a way to make the stock and at this point very annoying fourth act Enterprise action scene makes sense in the context of the episode they were talking about. So Enterprise for the past season and beyond that even really has had this really terrible habit that I've complained about and you've complained about, where they always devolve it into an action sequence at some point. It always just becomes Archer and some guy fighting each other or chasing each other, shooting each other with phasers. This is the first time where it made a lot of sense to me. Like this is the only way that this genre can play out, is that you have to have a gunfight at some point. And so even though it was exactly what Enterprise does, I was like, oh, they found the perfect excuse to do what Enterprise always does, and it actually works and elevates the material in this case.
Yeah, oddly enough, this episode works better than the one that was the lift of the actual Western.
The second sequel. Marauders, the Klingon episode. Yeah.
I guess you could call it a lift of Seven Samurai, but regardless, it's more of a Magnificent Seven kind of thing, the way they were doing it, and that one doesn't work as well as this one does.
Yeah.
That being said, I think it works for the most part, but like it's a strange, fairly low stakes mission. Because they're just kind of like, these people seem to be human. What are they doing here? Well, okay, well, we know now. Let's go.
Yeah.
We can't take them with us. Yep. Maybe. And even at the end, Archer's like, I've just blown your collective minds telling you about the fact that Earth exists and is highly advanced. It's going to be a while before you see another person from Earth. I just need to...
We got a real problem we got to deal with first. I can't take you just now.
It's nice to know that you guys are here just in case Earth happens to get blown up. I'm not just saying that, hypothetical. No reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of weird where they're like, here's all of recorded history to deal with until we return. Most likely they're going to come back and that whole society has killed itself.
Yes. Yeah. Tuberculosis has claimed the entire town. The plague has come and cleaned everybody out.
But it was some weird stuff like that where it's like they're trying to, I think someone calls it out. I think maybe T'Pol calls it out. but they're like Archer is debating whether or not they should bring these people back to Earth, and T'Pol's like, are you high or something? These people can't go back to Earth.
Yeah,
these people are 300 years behind the times of modern civilization. It wouldn't work.
I have mixed opinions about it. I think what this episode is trying to do is a good attempt that, as all Enterprise episodes do, falls kind of short of being good at what it's trying to talk about. The thing that, maybe to get to the end first, the thing that kind of ruins it for me in a lot of ways is that Archer's response to this stuff is where I think a huge problem conceptually with Enterprise comes in, where as he's explaining how Earth has changed to this guy, he's like, we don't have prejudice anymore. We're basically the next generation Star Trek.
We don't have prejudice anymore, and I can tell you guys don't either because you're all white.
They have. So the episode is dealing with prejudice. It's taking that stand in, but it's my appropriate take on Enterprise should be that humanity in Starfleet and Archer are still struggling with these issues. Like they're trying to be better, but it doesn't. This episode isn't Enterprise to me, where Archer just beams down and is like, "You guys are fucking out to left field with this. Like we're way beyond all this stuff." This is Archer's take here is a very first season TNG take, where the characters would just lecture other people about like, we don't eat animals. We're above eating animals. You guys are filthy animal eaters. That's a problem to me for the Enterprise conception, just because it doesn't give Archer room to maneuver there. There's like nothing he can learn because he's just going to lecture people about it. But at the same time, I do like the prejudice angle. It's like a very simple, low stakes Star Trek thing that I actually found very old timey, which we can get into a bit. But I just thought it was I thought it was effective for what the genre episode was supposed to be. And I was a little bit upset also that they don't tie it into the Zindy in that case. But those are the two takeaways, that Archer's too moralistic in that the Zindy aren't tied in very effectively to the whole thing.
Yeah. I can't remember how they handle this in Discovery, because this is pretty much the same story as what's going on with the Kelpians, right? Because the Kelpians have the muck people who are eating them, and we find out the reason they're being eaten is because the Kelpians once ruled over them or some shit like that, right? So in this, it's the same story. In this case, the Skags are the Kelpians.
Yes.
And I think when you get into that kind of stuff, the moralizing that they're trying to do gets a little bit icky or muddy, because in order for this to really work, I think there really needs to be someone, probably T'Pol, who kind of understands why they're prejudiced against the Skags. Even though it's been 300 years, it's like still like these people were taken from their homes and turned into slaves by this group of people, and they are rightfully mad about it. It's been 300 years, but it still happened. And that never gets addressed. It's just, you guys need to stop being mad at the people who enslaved you 300 years ago, which through a modern lens, questionable at best as a theme.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what actually made me this episode actually brought me to, in a way that a few of the Star Trek episodes have done, it's like the death of liberalism in a lot of ways. Like it's this episode lectures about the nature and the pointlessness of cyclical hatred and cyclical violence, right?
Sure.
And now, just watching this through the modern lens, our entire culture is cyclical hatred and cyclical violence against people. So it's like Archer's point is like touching and old-fashioned, but I think he's right, actually, is that like, come on, people, like, get your, there's no, you have to move on. It's not that you were personally impacted by this. Like they're sort of on their own alien planet and stuff like that. But it's been hundreds of years, and two wrongs don't make a right, basically, is like the main takeaway from this. I just find that Archer's perspective, as you say, is to not be very modern, but I think the modern take is wrong about what he's saying. And I think that he's actually right in this case.
Well, I think the difference is that in this case, the people he's lecturing are in a position of power, whereas generally the modern take is not coming from a position of power in that sense. Because the people in this, the humans in this story have complete dominance over the Skags, which is not the case when you're reading it through a modern lens. So in this case, if you're looking at the show itself, I think, yeah, he's right. They're basically subjugating a people based on something that is 300 years old and is no longer applicable because of, stuff has moved on and they clearly won. Yeah. And the Skags are not a threat to them anymore.
Neither side is tied to that. Neither the Skags nor the humans are of that conflict. Like they're the ancestors of that conflict.
Right. And do you think this is supposed to be like some sort of like Middle Eastern analogy or something for a fairly Western look at warring tribes in Afghanistan or Iraq or something?
I just thought it was I thought it was actually Native American, a Native American point. They add a sort of additional flip to that the Native Americans were never in control of the white settlers. Like they add that to make it kind of a little like a little sci-fi twist on it or whatever. But I think basically it's just the subjugation of the natives and is my approach to how I viewed this anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You think it was actually more tied into the Middle Eastern Afghanistan conflict?
I have no idea. I don't know if that was something you were thinking given the time this was made. But again, yeah, even with the Native American thing, it's not a total one-to-one metaphor that works because the Native Americans weren't subjugating the rich people the white people who came to America. It was and so in that case, the prejudice against the Native Americans is much less warranted than it is here. So I think that little switch, I think, makes it it makes his speech make more sense within the episode.
Sorry, which switch is when they
the fact that he's talking to the group who is now started off as the subjugated class and is now as the dominant class. Yeah. And I think it makes sense in the episode, but I think that's what is stopping it from making sense in a modern context.
Yeah. I guess personally, I enjoy his point because.
Oh, sure. Yeah. In general, sure. Yeah.
It's a good point. It seems to be just like the zero sum game that the modern audience would see through this, which is that the oppressors who've been oppressing you deserve to be punished for, like, if you look at this as like a modern black lens, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like it's through a system of oppression that you've ended up at this point. Now to sort of get back to what you think you deserve, which is what these white Westerners do in this, to think that they deserve to get back to some sort of like equal playing field. It's always going to seesaw back and forth where there's never any kind of equilibrium to it. You can't overcompensate to create equilibrium because all it does is puts the tilt the other way to get back to it. So then you're dealing with the oppression that this episode is talking about from the other direction, where once they took over control, they just overcompensated, and now the Skags are back to where the things are, and that this is never going to actually solve anything. I did find it, to your point, it's through a modern lens, which again I personally don't like. I don't like the modern lens of looking at things that way. This is a very strange concept for Archer to be talking about, or it's a strange episode that Archer has. I think it just makes I think it makes the politics of Star Trek and the politics of like the era that fed into this seem desperately bygone at this point, which is kind of sad to me because I like those ideas. But it's the first episode of a Star Trek that made me feel that way, which was interesting. And I don't know why, because it's not like this is an unusual setup for Star Trek.
Yeah, it's it is a really fascinating point to try to make in a show like this, because as I joked about earlier, it's exclusively white people in this episode. And it's like, I feel like you get into trouble immediately if you make it any other way, because that immediately assigns real world value to whoever is getting subjugated or lectured at or whatever, or whoever's in power. And it's like, it's kind of difficult to really tell this story.
Well, there's a black man in town, you mean?
Yeah. Like if the Skags are all people of color, and
I was just thinking, like, if they cast it where the deputy was a black guy, right? Mm-hmm. You'd be go into this, and it makes no sense that they've gone beyond their contemporary prejudice, right? But they hate the Skags, but they're like, this black guy is excellent. Like, he's,
right.
It's that kind of a thing. Yeah. It's where they would treat the modern casting as fair, but they hate the Skags. Is just kind of, they've managed to overcome one prejudice, but they can't overcome the second prejudice. Would be the twisted weirdness of that storyline.
Yeah, I would say this probably works best as like a written story than a visual story, where you don't get super specific about what everybody may or may not look like. Unfortunately,
I wonder what the makeup of towns like that. Like even if I'm just thinking of Deadwood, there's not a lot of black people in Deadwood. There are in later seasons, but it didn't feel to me like, if I went back into these Western towns, would I see a lot of black people in those towns? I don't know.
I mean, I can tell you what they're missing is the Chinatown section.
Yeah, they're missing Chinatown. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was a very prominent in Deadwood.
Yeah. Archie says that he is a San Francisco cocksucker in this episode.
Because, even there, though, too, it's like they, at this point, what is their identity? Are they even identifying as people from Earth at that point? Like, they kind of aren't, right?
That's a good question. They're not. They think of Earth as a myth, according to the sheriff. It's been so long that they don't identify as humans. They would identify as humans, but they don't identify as Earthlings or anything like that.
Yeah,
that makes a difference.
It just creates it lends itself to. I think I agree with what you're saying, in that Archer's point is fairly simplistic, because I think once you start scratching the surface about the makeup of this world and circumstances, it's going to get complicated really quickly. But yeah, I think overall it's a good fun episode. It's a good Western. The opening, cold open, very weird. It is very similar to Deadwood, but it's like, at that point you don't know that the person that's getting hung is like an alien, really, because he's just got shit. He's got shit on him, but it's dark, so you can't tell if it's like blood or whatever.
The alien makeup in this is just acne too. So
yeah, it's like really bad acne. Yeah.
Couple clear soap pads.
It's tough to tell if it just feels like a Western where a guy gets pretty brutally lynched. Yeah. In the opening scene, and then it's been a long road.
I don't think it's as bad as the previous episode. I think was worse. I think this one seemed a little bit more believable.
Honestly, if it becomes a running joke in this show to see how dark the cold open can get to contrast with the ridiculousness of that song, I'm in.
You gotta have fun with it. I think maybe what was interesting to me about it is that I think maybe what makes this the best of the three Westerns is that I feel that this episode actually has a Western theme to it. It has a this idea of the Westerns being so interested in like a Deadwood way about the dawning of a civilization, like what that actually means, and the Westerns are always about challenging that. It's about the struggle between the individual and the society and stuff like that. You're running from the law, and the law is encroaching on you, and it's all very Western genre tropey stuff. And I thought that this one, where the other Westerns in Star Trek are, hey, we're in a Western, let's shoot some guys with our 6-shooter. the TNG one is this bunch of datas. All the datas are all the characters in this holodeck program. This is weird. And then the Spectre of the Gun one is just due to budget cuts, we're going to shoot this episode in a Western area. This one, I thought that it worked in terms of the crew of the Enterprise being outsiders to this town and there being a struggle about what it means to live together between the Skags and the humans who live in that society, and that sort of reciprocal cyclical violence is not a way that a society can function over time.
Right.
Like you can't build off of that. And Archer coming in as the outsider who kind of opens the door to a better civilization for them, where the episode kind of touchingly ends on them teaching the Skag children and the sheriff standing in the doorway kind of like happy to be there and happy to be building this thing because, as you say, they're not going to get picked up for 500 years by any starship.
Right.
They have to learn how to deal with it. I appreciated that this episode was actually a Western in a lot of ways. Like it wasn't just we have a Western themed show with a bunch of hats. Let's all put on hats.
Gene,
So I give it credit.
Gene, Gunsmoke's using all the Western costumes. Does it work if the Western town is populated by people in togas?
There's some kind of point to be made there. I give the show credit. Like Enterprise doesn't always do that, I guess would be my point. So I felt that this episode was actually well conceived.
Yeah.
It sounds like it didn't excite you all that much. And I know that some of the other patrons didn't like it. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of arguing as to why I think this episode is very good, especially for Enterprise. And I don't know if I'm making a compelling argument.
No, I liked it. It's just it's kind of an odd one because it's one where the Enterprise guys don't really do much. They have their gunfight at the end, but even there, it's like the one thing that I came away thinking about was like, does this technically count as a Prime Directive violation?
No, they're human.
Okay. But it's been 300 years, and clearly they're intermarrying and
yeah,
mixing races and stuff.
they're skagging their boots.
But
According
like,
to
at what point does the Prime Directive now apply to a human civilization that has no knowledge of where they came from?
It's a good question. There's the TNG episode, The Masterpiece Society, has the same thing where a human colony has been separated from Earth for hundreds of years, and in that episode, the justification to doing things is that they're human, therefore the Prime Directive doesn't apply. So that seems to be the case. These guys, it would have been one thing. I think also losing it is that they do know they were abducted by aliens, so there's a, like, we know that spaceships are possible. So it also takes that out of the equation where if you know that faster than light travel happens, apparently you can save people. I'm glad they didn't get into the Prime Directive stuff because I don't think it's relevant.
It was just something I was thinking of because, like, I was thinking if aliens showed up tomorrow and said, or quote unquote aliens showed up tomorrow and said, "People of Earth, you are actually originally from SETI Alpha 5. We're here to bring you back or whatever." I think everybody would be like, "No, I think we're pretty good here."
Yeah. All right.
A, we don't believe you. B, what are you selling? C, I think we're good where we are. Like, it's just such a strange concept of just like, I don't know. I guess they're helping their society move forward by telling them what's going on Earth or whatever. But
well, there is a magical act performed here, which is that the teacher gets shot and Phlox can heal her. So it would be like if aliens came in, you had stage 4 lung cancer and they touched you and they cured the cancer and they're like, we're you and you can actually do this on this other planet. There's a temptation there that this episode doesn't really get into the fact that the world, like, that they can leave to go to a better place because the characters aren't really into that, but that's the implication, I think.
Yeah, and I was a little surprised that they didn't have a scene like that where when they're talking about the fact that these are humans from Earth, they've been here for 300 years, and someone is like, is it really our place to tell them what's going on here? I mean, what good does it do them for us to show up as people from the sky, tell them about Earth, and then leave again?
Yeah.
But
save the Skags.
Yeah, that's a different show, I guess. But yeah, it's Yeah, I just found it strange because the Enterprise guys don't do a ton. They just sort of solve the mystery and tell everybody what's going on, and then they leave. There's not really anything they're after. It's like they're just there, essentially out of curiosity.
Yes.
Which like I said, I think the mystery actually works pretty well. It's fairly interesting. The one line that I kind of got tripped up on is when they're figuring out that they're from Earth or whatever, and Archer does his back to the camera dramatic line reading thing, and he says they kidnapped the wrong people. Was his intention there, like, in a don't mess with Texas type way, where he's like, you guys just kidnapped the wrong people?
Oh,
like that kind of thing.
I think it's because it's after the line where the Skags kidnapped them and then they killed all the Skags and took over. I think he's saying that they.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
don't mess with Texas was the basis of that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I rewound it like 3 times because I kept thinking I missed something where like they were after the Dutch or something, and they ended up.
Those pliant Dutch people.
Yeah, they heard Switzerland never got into anything, so they were going after those guys.
There's just a half-finished windmills all over this alien planet where they. If only we had the Dutch. No, I don't. I think it's just they picked up some leathernecks instead, and they got the business end of their
Speaking
plasma
of
rifle.
leathernecks, there was a black Mako in this episode.
Yep.
So headcanon, Idris Elba from Star Trek Beyond.
He's moving very quick. You can't get a good look at him.
Yep.
Mako's continue to not do anything in the show.
Nope.
Unfortunately, they're just there. Although
we were watching it and they kept doing close-ups on that one woman Mako who had like the rifle, and my girlfriend said, so does she just not talk? And I was like, I've never seen that character ever before. And she said, why are they focusing on her? And I was like, I don't know, because she got the biggest gun, I guess.
there's one scene where the camera sits on her where you think she's going to say something. She's just like aiming her gun and you think she's going to yell look out or something. But yeah, they're just focused on her, just have some Mako action. Leading up to that, though, I thoroughly enjoyed the shot of when they land the shuttlecraft in the main street and they step out and Archer says, we need to talk. It's a very Western gunslinger thing. And it's just I love the juxtaposition of they're then wearing their Star Trek uniforms as they come back and stuff like that. I thought it was cool. I thought that was a good thing. And it led into the gunfight, which works in this episode. I normally hate this Enterprise like action stuff. I'm not going to say this is the best example of how to get around it, but I thought it was a good example of how to get around it. Makes sense. You got to have a gunfight at this point.
Yeah, I like that they worked I like that they worked, the stunning the guys into like the old Western guys fall out of a window type tropes and stuff. But that couldn't have been any better for the guy to get stunned and then fall out of a window and fall through like the roof of something onto the ground. But I appreciate what they were doing.
I think this is the first Star Trek episode where I've seen someone adjust mid-fight their phaser setting. So I think Archer is shooting above a guy at a high setting, and then when he shoots the guy, he has to click it down a little bit, and he shoots him to stun him. And it was like, I don't think I've ever seen on-the-fly phaser charging. It's always before they go into battle, they'll like set it to maximum stun, and they'll click their buttons together or whatever. But this is like on-the-fly thing. And then Archer gets fucking lit up. And
that was a hell of a squib they blew off on his shoulder there.
He takes quite a beating.
I don't think Phlox can fix that one.
No, that's there's definitely going to be a scar. Maybe not on the woman, but Archer's half of his breast bone got shot off, I think, when he took that one.
Yeah, he's going to need like a total shoulder reconstructive surgery, I think.
And then ends in a mano a mano. You can't take Archer down. He's gonna fist fight this guy, and that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Can't throw a punch quite as well with a hole that size in your shoulder, unfortunately. No. But he gets it done.
Anything else to say about North Star?
No, I think that covered everything that I had anyway.
We'll go to the patrons. They might have something to trigger our memories about this one. That's it for North Star. Let's take another break, play another clip. We'll come back, read some patron thoughts, and then give our final thoughts about North Star.
All the things humanity's accomplished, building ships like this, traveling to other worlds. And we're still down there shooting each other.
The progress on Earth, it didn't happen overnight.
But it was progress all the same. You've managed to change. We haven't. Even if you could take us back, I don't think we're ready.
Thank you very much for listening to today's podcast. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile. It's the best way to support us. Patreon.com/thepenskyfile. You get a couple, you give a couple bucks a month and you get extra stuff. You get extra podcasts. We're close to our Voyager goal. If we get over a certain amount, we'll do every single episode of Voyager. We have extra podcasts. We do the sci-fi movies. We do Star Trek revisits. We do movie reviews. All of that. There's like 100 podcasts on the Patreon feed at this point. So you sign up, you get access to them. And a special thank you goes to our Captain Tier supporters. Special thank you to Tark Latif, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Michael Pond, Andrew Sherlock, Matthew Ross, Samuel Custer, Matt Cutler, Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Pouch, Nick Sergi, Sean Grim Santo, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Darth Mosk, Walt 13 Hero, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elledge, Rune Vendler, HH28, Stefan Minton, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Point Extra G, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Nick the Rat, Captain Brazen, Eric Santuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, Patrick Seba, Groppler John Zorn, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Zane Majors, Soylent Blue, Woodrow, Dave Davies, Retail, Worf's Tiny Brown Dix, Olivia Pardue, Tom Hickey, Matthew Houston, Captain McMunchausen, second page, James McLennan, Jose Hunter's EWNF Remixes, Will Clay, Mark C., Bella, Jonas, and Lokai. Thank you very much for supporting
And for the
us.
record, no, I won't.
No. Will Clay not. Thou shall you not. It is a coincidental thing. I don't think it's a pun. I think it's his name. So
I understand.
Will Clay or Woney. You should change your patron name to that. That's it. Thank you, patrons. And as always, our patrons get to leave their thoughts about upcoming episodes and we read them.
We're going to start to have to do a separate show for each episode just for patron thoughts.
I know. They're getting very long.
No, I mean, not just that. It's just that we've got so many, which is amazing. Thank you guys. But it's like our shows end up getting like 20 minutes longer because we have to.
No, they definitely. Yeah, it's not a comment on the quality. It's just there's more of them now. And when I do the edit, it's like our opening segment is 40 minutes, and I'm like, all right, it'll be quick, and then it's another 40 minutes on top of that at the very end. Thank you for your generosity, everybody. And if we don't reply to everybody, that's usually why before we start recording the second section, I go, there's a lot of these, Clay. We got to get through these kind of quick because I need to go to bed. Jakey's Gamer says, North Star, a morality play, Western in space, Star Trek in a nutshell. It's a fun episode and the guest actors are great visuals and good action scenes too. I do think there was a missed opportunity here for Archer to see the human-Skag relationship as a parallel of what could happen between Earth and the Zindy. Some potential character development and story movement there that they just didn't take advantage of. Still, I like this one. 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's missing, really, because I think it works totally fine as it is. I think it's a fun Western and whatever. But I think what's missing is Archer drawing some sort of parallel, or anybody really drawing some sort of parallel from it. And I mean, I guess you could argue that the parallel can be drawn. It's just not explicitly stated.
Yeah, I wonder about that because that would be my thing. I wonder, like, because when DS9, even in the midst of its war arc, with long seasons like this, it had episodes that were not related to anything. You know, it was like, these are just our standalones. And I don't think people seem to care about those ones. I don't know what it is about the Zindy arc. It's almost like we passed a point in time where now that this television show was made in 2003, its serialized story has to be present in every single episode. And I don't think that works for Star Trek, especially a show with 20-something episodes every season. I would take your point that the parallel is there. The show, in my opinion, wisely decides to not hammer it on over the head with it. Mm-hmm. Like, because there's only so many episodes we can have where Archer realizes something,
sure,
but then continues on his mission with this bloodlust where you go, is he learning anything?
Yeah, that's the tough part, because like if the implication is there, it's just not specifically pointed to. You've got the situation where Archer is taking a position that he's being fairly hypocritical about.
Right.
Which is fine. It'd be nice if they, called that out. It doesn't have to be in this episode, but at some point, if they called that out, that'd be nice. But
yeah,
because characters don't have to. Everything they say doesn't have to mean everything they everything they say doesn't have to be representative of everything they think or do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They're humans most of the time.
Yes, and especially like it's been a criticism of Archer for us that he never seems to learn, but I think that in a serial story like this, the lesson is not learned in an instant. You know, Archer has to have a journey where he gradually lets go of that. And I just consider this episode to be a piece of that journey where he is slowly seeing various sides of the issue that he's dealing with.
Sure.
I still don't think it's great, but I think that's a believable approach to me. Matt Ross says, Deadwood Enterprise style. This episode is fun and cheesy and totally in the wrong season as it has nothing to do with the Zindy. We've seen it in a Voyager episode called The 37s, but it's still fun, and one question is how come there are no tech development in the past 300 years? 3 out of 5. Nick the Rat says, imagine watching Deadwood's first episode with It's Been a Long Time right after the first hanging. It's almost as jarring as watching Malcolm hopping around looking like a kid with a Nerf gun. How are the humans able to overthrow advanced aliens, and why did they not adopt any of the technology? At first I thought this episode spat in the eye of the Prime Directive, but then I remembered they were human. The amazing and gory effect of Archer getting shot was beautiful. I give this schlock 3 gaping bullet holes in Archer's chest out of 5.
That really was like a Paul Verhoeven RoboCop squib that they blew off on his shoulder.
A chunk of beef
impressed.
flies at the camera. Yeah. Royo says, a bunch of primitive humans overthrow an advanced alien civilization using some of that famous Enterprise logic that will eventually have Mirror Universe Zephyr Cochrane and his Hollow buddies defeating the Vulcan First Contact crew and using their ship to conquer the entire Vulcan Confederacy. The result is that Enterprise seemingly implies human supremacy is the big twist of the episode, is that the only one that will stand up for the Skagarans was actually a Skagaran all along. Perhaps because this episode so heavily resembles a goofy TOS episode that its betrayal of Roddenberry's vision of humanity is so stark, as in contrast to City on the Edge of Forever and the boundless optimism and compassion of Edith Keeler, the genocidal humans of the Old West appear to have no redeeming value. And the episode doesn't really have anything to say about that either, as there's not even an African American in town to point out the hypocrisy of their society. Even in the Nazi TOS episode Patterns of Force, the Nazis were given a more nuanced depiction, with the party secretary Daras being a secret member of the underground. A bland 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I disagree. Really? Like, we're too far into this, I think, at this point. First of all, he wouldn't be an African American because he's not born in America. He's born on some space planet. That's the main problem with that.
Yeah, let's get the semantics out of the way first.
There was some it might have been on the Discord. Someone called Idris Elba an African American, and it's always the British people that correct him and say he's actually British.
Yeah.
That's how poisoned our American minds have become to this thing, where we just call black people African Americans even if they're born in Japan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they still do it to people who are born in Dominican Republic. You know, it's who are neither of those things.
No, I know. Well, I mean, if you're a black person born in Japan, you're not an African American. If you're born in Haiti, you're not an African American. It's just like.
Right.
Very strange, strange use of language. But yeah, I don't. Where's the comment? Is it gone? Can't be gone. I don't find this town to be irredeemable. He says the characters in this town have no redeeming value. They learn a lesson by the end of it.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
They warm to the idea shockingly fast.
They open the schools back up. They bring them on. I don't know. I don't think it's that cynical, I guess, of an episode. Like I think that there's a lot of the similarities to Edith Keeler in it. Honestly, he mentions that as a contrast. I don't see the difference between the two of them. Cerulio says, when I first watched Star Trek and TNG, I was too young to understand how ridiculous space cowboys, space gangsters, space Nazis, and space Irish were. For better or worse, I just accepted that those types of people were just part of the Star Trek universe, and now as an adult, I forgive and accept the premise of episodes like this. Unfortunately, this one isn't all that good, and I was only left with 2 thoughts. 1, why do the aliens love to take humans for slave labor only to immediately get overthrown? And 2, was this episode trying to draw some analogy to African Americans when the Archer says a lot has changed in 300 years since humans were taken from Earth, and the sheriff says, they abducted my ancestors, Captain, turned them into slaves, and we tend to have a long memory when it comes to that sort of a thing. That's the modern lens right there, I think. 3 out of 5 from Cerulio. But it's interesting. It's an episode that really has changed, I think. Like, I think a lot of the stuff that we see in it today is probably not intentional. It's just the way that society is now working.
Maybe. I mean, that's a pretty direct reference I think they're making. It's kind of, there's really not too many other analogies to be drawn from that specific statement that he says.
Well, I mean, but other societies have been enslaved in the world. You know, it's not just like the blacks aren't uniquely enslaved in this. Like the Jews could be something, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't see it as specific. I think now in a modern context, I think it specifically hits that area, but I think that it can just be a generic sort of prejudice thing before then, because is Mayweather in this episode? Like there's no black character in the town or anything. Like I think if Star Trek is not that subtle, if this was what they were doing, there would be a black character in the town who is experiencing that kind of a thing, you know? I think it's just more generic than that.
And what's more generic than a town full of whiteys?
Not much, unfortunately. listening to our Spotify best of the 80s mixes. Cardinal Doomsday says, North Star, a man gets lynched and they play that totally inappropriate theme song. Again, we want Sheriff Worf to come and clean up this town. Earth has evolved and discovered warp flight, but Deadwood in the Expanse hasn't. And Trip can't ride a horse. 1 evil deputy out of 5. Strange, just a semi-joke sequence, I guess.
Why did they need that horse?
They had to go to the... Right, how does Archer get out there? I guess he rides a horse. He must ride a horse.
I guess, like, did they just... they only rode the horse out to meet them.
The Skags. They needed the horse to find the Skag town. Yeah.
Yeah. Where every song on the radio is the Lido Shuffle by Boz Skaggs.
If interesting they didn't just replicate some money for them instead of having to do this bartering system where he's got a gun and a harmonica and hopefully that's enough to get the horse off the guy. He should have just sent him down with some gold.
Do they have a replicator at this point?
I don't know. How do they make those guns?
Ooh, good point. Yeah, there's someone tied to a wagon wheel out in the that they knocked out and stole his clothes, I think. Somewhere out in the what does he say to watch out for? The desert vipers or something?
Oh yeah, desert vipers, yeah. Yeah, someone's out there in trouble. That's a good point. They actually don't know where they got their clothing from if they don't have replicators. Maybe they can replicate things. They've given up on the transporters dangerous to use in this too because they just get beamed out. This
was the first time I feel like they've just straight up gone for the transporter in like without making a big deal about, sir, are you sure? You know, something, that kind of thing. So I guess that's just part of the game now. Yeah. It was hanging by a thread, honestly. that whole thing. It was getting kind of awkward. Yeah, I think if they really wanted to address it, they could cover it with the retrofit of Enterprise or something where they updated the technology and transporter technology's gotten a lot safer in these 8 months that you've been out in cruising around Alpha Centauri. At this point, are we really gaining anything by having a shuttle go everywhere? Like, I felt that meant something early, but I don't think definitely. Yeah. I don't think it means anything anymore. And like think of the episode with the Kurgan in it, with Clancy Brown in it, where like the whole second half of the episode is them like running through the desert trying to get back to the only way they can get off the planet, which is the shuttlecraft. Yeah. That's actually that's the best thing that the shuttlecraft and the dangerous transporter did, is that you can't just, there's no logic problem. Right. We'll just beam them out of there and see what happens. I like that. Yeah. And this one, maybe they want to continue to be careful about that or something. I'm not exactly sure. Latte Librarian says, Archer is more convincing as a cowboy than a captain. This is maybe the only episode where I would say Discovery did it better. Was I the only one who thought Reed looked a little too pleased to shoot to Paul? 2 Western cliches out of 5. We didn't even mention that with the shoot the hostage moment. Yeah, pop quiz. How did they not have a scene afterwards where T'Pol was like, seriously? or even like, you made the right choice. I would definitely do the same thing to you. Yeah, I was a little bit because, well, I guess it does work. I don't know. I'm always a little bit surprised that the cowboy that is holding her hostage is surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. It feels like it's more surprising in Speed when he does that than it does here.
I always feel that the cowboy, after T'Pol gets shot, is very slow to react to Malcolm still pointing a gun at him. You know, he's like, well, what the heck's going on here?
Man, Jeff Daniels really gets a raw deal in Speed. He gets shot in the leg, and then later on he gets blown up.
Yep. And doesn't get to ride the bus.
Arc. Would say he does not get to ride the bus.
Doesn't get to ride the bus at all. I assume Latte Librarian's talking about Discovery, the Kelpians thing that you are. I can't think of anything else that would be a reference there. Point Extra G says, honestly, without the Western elements, there's not a lot here, and the setup is stretched pretty thin logically. It's extremely unlikely that a group of people would create and keep 250 years later a perfect 1870s environment down to the buildings, language, attire, firearms, and the like, but I don't care.
He's clearly never been to Colonial Williamsburg then.
Yeah, Old Sturbridge Village.
Yeah, Sturbridge Village.
This is what people do. I don't care. It's a freaking Western. We get a saloon, a jailbreak, Colt and Winchesters versus phasers. What the hell else do you want? Way better than a fistful of datas. Maybe not quite as good as Spectre of the Gun. Interesting. I thought that's a good comment, I think. Just because it buys into the Western thing more successfully than the other ones do. Eric Sanchuan says, they love their Westerns on Star Trek, don't they? Maybe not. There's only 3. And I guess this is the best one because it has plenty of action and isn't paced like a root canal. Although we have talked about how DS9 is a Western in space. It's in conception. It's just not explicitly wearing cowboy hats. Yeah. But still, I have questions. Why are there cowboys? Why are they still living their lives on the set of Kenny Rogers' The Gambler? American humans evolved after 200 years. Why wouldn't these transplanted humans also evolve after overthrowing their captors? Anyway, there's nothing inherently wrong with this episode. It may feel like an episode of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, but it's perfectly watchable.
Despite the fact that they overthrew a technologically advanced race that could leave the planet and kidnap people and bring them back light years away, they never had an industrial revolution. So they were really kind of stuck in the late 1800s there.
When was it? Wasn't the Industrial Revolution before this? When was the Industrial Revolution?
I don't know. I've been watching The Foods That Built America a lot, and then it all seems to take place around like 1900. So
yeah, maybe it was.
When canning technology got really good.
Yeah. Do they say, I don't know if they say a year where this one is supposed to be taking place. Point Extra says 1870s, but maybe it wasn't that. Yeah, I guess the Industrial Revolution would have been around the 19th. Well, it must have been before that, though, right? 18 something, because
according to Google, it started in 1760 and ended in 1840, so it was well over at that point.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess you need the Industrial Revolution to build cities. So
right. Well, I guess my point is, like, they couldn't build a factory or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There were no factories being built in Tombstone or Deadwood,
yes.
And so they didn't have the means to do it here.
Yeah, maybe not to build a city, but you need the. There's still post-industrial revolution. There's still Wild West, which is always a conflict of the Western.
Right. And yeah, it's the conflict of most Westerns. Is there's a train coming. Yeah. And none of us know how trains work.
And the horse starts off leading the train, and then the train just overtakes it, and you say, that's progress, baby. That's progressive. Cal Barrett says, welcome the fucking North Star. Can be combative. No joke, this is easily the episode of Enterprise I've watched the most, maybe even the episode of any Star Trek series I've watched the most. Social commentary in the cycle of violence is simplistic at best and ham-fisted at worst, but before I watched these types of episodes when I was younger, I thought ethnic cleansing was a makeup brand for black women, so it must be doing something right. Given the subject matter of the show's lessons and the talk with McReady, probably would have had more texture coming from Mayweather rather than that San Francisco cocksucker Archer. But regardless of that, this episode is an excuse to have a lot of fun with the Western Tropes as an anachronistic site of Starfleet, attacking a Western town with phasers, offering plenty of enjoyable TOS pulp. 5 out of 5.
Man, English commercials are a lot edgier than I thought they were.
Yeah. Europeans are more racist than Americans. You go to all the soccer games are throwing bananas at people.
We're just going to say that. That's the subtitle of our show. Pencil file. Europeans are more racist than Americans. My
European grandparents were far more awkward around race than my American grandparents were. Yeah. Although it's the British office stuff. I think is always the they have a racism towards Pakistanis that we don't over here because they just have more Pakistanis in Britain. Okay. It's just a weird difference, like because the the BBC Office always has jokes about awkward interaction with Packies and things like that. And it's just something that Americans don't have a conception about. We have our own racial racist specialties.
We've got plenty of our own issues to deal with, I think.
It's just we're all different, but all the same, I guess, is the way to look at this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kyle. Captain Brazen says, "Settle up, partner, and get ready for the Wild West in space. A perfectly preserved Western town populated by real cowboys, real saloons, real horses that you can rent for loaning a harmonica, and of course a massive gunfight to boot. What more could you ask for? Oh, and sorry if you wanted more story with this one. Well, the writers got together, talked about character growth, and realized, but Western. This is quite the pulpy fun episode, despite the writers not contributing again to the Zindy Arc while forcing a half-assed social commentary of racism is bad down our throats with a spurred boot. Like the Borg episode from season 2, turn off your brain and simply enjoy the mindless fun, including Malcolm stunning T'Pol with his pistol, but not in the way he had hoped. I 3 fully realized versions of my childhood game of astronauts versus cowboys come to life out of 5.
You know, it's one of those things where, again, I think if you start thinking about it, it kind of falls apart pretty quickly. You just kind of enjoy the fact that they're doing a Western. But like those kinds of Western towns, like Deadwood, they weren't just there to hang out. They were there in support of like the mining industry or something.
Yeah, people were trying to make money out there.
Yeah. And there's no indication that any of these people do anything.
No, there's no... They don't have an industry after the Skagarans left. It's not like they have a drive to do anything. Yeah.
It's like they have a clothing shop because it's a Western place, and Western places have clothing shops.
Yeah.
But they got to get that stuff from somewhere. Although I guess they do imply that there are other settlements and stuff.
That was a little strange, too, because I think Archer has a... When he's still pretending to be there, the woman is asking him if he knows the story of that guy who settled the town or something, and kind of a weird sequence. Where Archer, I couldn't tell if Archer legitimately recognized the guy or was just going along with, of course I know who that is. That you look just like that guy. Who is that?
Jebediah Springfield.
Yeah, Cooper Hurtenwinkle or whatever the guy's name was in this one. Thank you, Captain Brazen. Matt Cabanas Adley says the episode, I'm sorry if I butchered the middle name there, but the episode where Archer shows he's a better Starfleet captain than Pike and does what Pike should have done in New Eden. 5 bottles of Skagaran whiskey out of 5.
Oh, maybe that's the one he was talking about. The New Eden, because that's kind of the same thing.
That's true.
Well, it's not exactly the same thing.
But it's humans stolen from Earth. Yeah. They don't have prejudice in that episode, though, do they? I don't think so.
No, it's a religious thing, right?
Yeah, it's religious. What do they get stolen from like Earth and then they find a new religion in New Eden?
The Red Angel transports them all to save them.
And they worship the Red Angel at that point,
yes,
right? Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. And have absolutely no interactions with natives, avoiding all of the stickiness of colonialism and all other sorts of metaphors and themes that could be brought up.
And the final guy that Pike talks to is an African American. Excuse me, is an African New Edenian. Groppler John Soren says, North Star, they said it pretty quick, but the guy got lynched in the cold open for killing someone named Clay. Suggestive dialogue. If you give us a horse, I won't play this harmonica. Evolving away from latex forehead prosthetics, the Skagarans are just like humans, but have blistering acne. There's nothing terribly profound to be had here, but it hits all the dramatic and comedic beats. This is the most enjoyable of Enterprise, among the most enjoyable of Enterprise's episode, and it's the best of Trek's 3 Westerns. 5 out of 5.
I would like to hope that if I one day am killed by a Skagaran, our listeners do know how to hold a grudge and specifically go after that person and after the Skagarans for the next 300 years. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm just speaking holistically. If on the personal level, of course, vendettas are ethically correct and
really necessary, you know.
Totally necessary to living a life that you want to live. Mary Pat F says, I guess I can't get over the concept that a highly advanced race, the Skagarans, left the Expanse, traveled all the way to Earth to enslave humans, despite passing other populations to enslave, yet also brought the humans guns, horses, and other Western lifestyle back with them. Yet the humans overthrow them, but still did not adapt any of the Skagaran tech and still kept living like a Western movie scenario. This was just not for me. 2 out of 5.
It is really kind of like a Bottle City of Kandor type thing from Superman, where Brainiac just like chunks out a section of town and just takes the whole thing with, so everything is built into it already. Like they all the buildings and the horses and all the other accoutrement of the era. Because otherwise there was like a couple guys there who were like, hey, let's make some hats like we had back home on Earth. Some big hats.
It is, I didn't even realize it, but it is in retrospect surprising that this feels like the episode where those people somehow got transported and don't realize that they're not on Earth somehow.
It does. Yeah.
It's
actually kind of surprising they didn't do that, actually.
I think that's even harder to explain than why haven't you evolved in 200 years? It's like, this is clearly not Earth. Like, where the hell are we? Tom Hickey says, although I think the aliens do abduct them because they are exactly used to living in the landscape of this planet. Like, basically this planet looks like Oklahoma or something like that, and they're willing to take them there. North Star, Tom Hickey, final comment. It would have been neat to see the humans evolve a separate branch of Wild West culture, something slightly alien, rather than completely retain the lingo and style of the times. I think if you're going to do an episode with this sci-fi setup, which is decent, you get more creative with the people that you're supposed to reflect something about human nature, at least slightly different clothes and slang. Instead, it's mostly a carbon copy of the time period. Wasn't nearly as fun as it could have been. Oh, and prejudice is bad. But I liked during the final shootout when Reed's phaser hit a water trough and it made a little splash. That
was good.
It's the small things in these Enterprise episodes. Yeah. Thank you, patrons, for all your comments. I'm making a note here about how I want to close this out. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your comments about North Star. A wide variety of opinions here. A lot of 5s, a lot of 2s, and some 3s mixed in. Clay, what are you going to give this one?
I don't know. It's tough. I'm gonna say a low 4 because
sure.
It didn't blow me away, but I think it's one of the more entertaining ones, especially in this season so far.
Yeah.
Which is a plus for the episode, but like a negative for the show, if I'm being honest.
Yep.
Because they've kind of tried to change everything around and it's not quite doing it for me. And then they do a one-off where people ride horses and shoot guns, and all of a sudden I'm like, yay.
This is what I signed up for. I'm a little
more shoulder explosions in the Zindy Arc, guys. Come on.
I'm a little to get off that point. I'm a little I'm quite let down by the Zindy Arc so far. It's not the way that people say that season 4 is very good, but people are saying season 3. Some people are saying, I don't think this is a consensus or anything, but some people are saying like season 3 is good. Someone asked on the Discord, I think season 3 of Star Trek Enterprise is not much different than the first 2 seasons, except it has this backbone of an arc that's running through it, but it's not improved the show in any dramatic way.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm going to give this a 4. I think this is one of the favorite episodes of Enterprise that I've seen so far. This is probably like a top 5 at this point, maybe even higher than that. I like the way it's shot. I like the style. I like the sort of TOS-y nature of it, that it's just kind of like this little quick hit of an action adventure. I like that they stepped away from the Zindy. I thought that was a good choice for a little bit. I think that they make the Western actually a Western. I think that the philosophy and the ethics of what they're talking about is very Star Trek-y and actually kind of appropriate to a Western. I agree with all the other patrons who say, and I said it last time, because this is the same lesson as the shipment, it's like prejudice is bad is basically what the show seems to, it's like, okay, like, yes, thank you. Can we go to recess now is my takeaway from that. Like, they never have anything interesting to say about it, really. It's just like I know prejudice is bad, and I'm not opposed to a prejudice storyline, but if all you take away from a story is prejudice is bad, in a lot of ways, it's similar to what Discovery does, which is that it states something that I know to be true and I think is like almost universal at this point, like depending on your point of view. I know there's some people who are going to disagree or whatever, but the vast majority of people are going to say prejudice is bad. And like Discovery, Enterprise never really tests what that means, or like, why do you think that, or what does it mean to be prejudiced, or why is it bad? It just kind of says it, and then it expects you to applaud and say that's 100% correct. You guys that's a great point. That's my problem with the episode, but otherwise I really like it. I'm going to give it a 4.
Yeah, it's I guess that's probably part of why I was thinking if maybe it had something to do with another Middle Eastern allegory, because that's where the shipment was kind of fairly obviously anchored in.
But I guess that mostly comes from the fact that he's part of the thing that the Enterprise is hunting. So when you tie it to Al Qaeda, that makes a little bit more sense to be like a 9/11 allegory, where you're like, not all Muslims are bad. Like
that's why I found it. I wasn't sure, because that makes a lot more sense in that context than that sort of analogy does in this context. This is just more of kind of like a general prejudice.
Yes, just
checking in with everybody. Just so you remember.
Rick's like, hey guys, we might be pushing the specific prejudice a little hard. Let's ease back and just give a more general sense of what prejudice is.
I just read this book by this great author, Dr. Seuss. And I learned,
these wonderful illustrations of Chinamen. They're tremendous.
Great, ethnically accurate illustrations. I feel like they came out of an encyclopedia. And really, it was the message. It was the message behind them that really stuck with me.
One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Brandon.
I don't care what color fish you are.
As long as you take your shirt off in my Star Trek episode.
Yeah, as you can tell, I'm trying to broaden my horizons because, not every episode can be a nice velour tracksuit for T'Pol to wear, even though the one she wears in this one, very nice.
Dr. Seuss did an uncredited rewrite.
Brandon, when we got the girl on the table and we're taking the bullet out of her, can we have the thing over her crotch? Can we just slide it down as far as we can go? Like, let's get caught trying, as I've said before.
They don't care in the 23rd century. It's all over 22nd century. Thank you, patrons. That's it. That's North Star. Thank you for leaving your thoughts. Thank you for supporting the show. Patreon.com/The File if you want to support the show there. Another long episode, Clay. It's all these comments we got to get through. And I just keep talking too much. They should
just do the show.
I know.
We'll turn the Penske File into just like an Amazon type platform where we present the vehicle and we take the money.
That's fine.
They run the show.
Yeah, as long as I get all the money, we can do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll create distribution centers in each of your towns that you can go to work at, and it will be fine.
Yes, the district. You know how Amazon is doing that thing now where they're recreating the bookstore, which is fucking ridiculous, where it's like, can you believe you can walk into a store and just buy a book the same day? It doesn't have to be shipped to you. The podcast equivalent would be, we show up at your job and we talk at the water cooler about these shows that you just watched while you are doing a podcast from your basement.
It's called Amazon Wine. That's it. Thank you very much for supporting us. We did all this. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
We've got Rotten Horror Picture Show. I don't know what week we're in, but we've just recently done Brian De Palma's Sisters and Ken Russell's The Devils. And we're covering on our Patreon, we're doing the Friday the 13th movies. In the month of April, we just finished Friday the 13th, the final chapter, which is the final chapter, but it's the fourth movie out of 12. And if that's a fan favorite, if you want to hear Amanda and I not be so charitable to the fan favorite, you can let me listen to us on that one.
Wait, which one is this? Which one's a fan favorite?
Part 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Determined is that's just like a general consensus, is that it's one of the better ones?
Yeah, it's generally considered from what I know is it's like the one that everybody seems to point to as being like the definitive Friday the 13th movie. And spoiler alert, it was probably my least favorite of the 4 so far. So
yeah,
but it's got Crispin Glover in it doing a crazy dance, so it's worth a watch.
Well,
and Badass, if it's not back at this point, it should be back pretty soon.
Probably is back by this point. That's good. Check out the Patreon. Check out the Friday the 13th Part 4. Badass is back. All the other shows continue as normal. Very close to the Patreon Voyager goal. If you guys kick us over, Voyager will eventually happen after Enterprise. That's it. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. We will see you later.